Where are we going? Thank you for being patient. This is Steve Bambera, and we've got a nice program today. We're going to do something a little different. We're going to add a few county reports, so we'll see how that goes. Be forgiving with us, if you will. And we're going to hear from Chowan, Brunswick, and Rowan County. We've got a great feature this morning with Helen and Ann. We're going to talk about rain gardens. Then we have our usual suspects. We have Mike Munster, who is reading his credit card bill down there on the left, checking out the fine print. And David Steffen is going to be with us, and he's still staring at that beetle. He's been doing that for the last month and trying to figure it out. So I'm filling in for Lucy, who's usually our little MC, and she's off on a business trip, as you can see. So we're going to forgive her for not being here this morning. So I guess I'd like to introduce Lee J. Hicks with us. She's going to be our moderator and take care of all things technical for us, because I am Illuminate illiterate. Well, that was pretty good. Illuminate illiterate. And she'll be our technical help. And we're all kind of learning here together, so hopefully it'll go as smoothly as possible. So we thank Lee J. for being here and doing this for us. Lee J., did you want to point out anything particular for some of our new people?
Yeah, I'll go over this little orientation. What you see on your screen is a snapshot of what you should see in Illuminate. Some features I'd like to point out to you: there's a green check and a red X up at the top. If you could click on that green check, let me know that you see it. Alrighty, get lots of green checks. Those checks and X's may at some point turn into letters if someone asks you to choose between A, B, and C. You can use the green checks and red X's to let us know if you understand or if you need some help. The next part is the emoticon area. You can, give us a hand clap, let us know if you're happy or confused. Right beside that, actually, right where, good. Thanks for clapping, David. So let me, right here, where the arrow is, right under that, is the raise your hand sign. If you do that, then that will let us know that you have a question. Please click on that before you go to speak. That way we'll have an idea of what order we're going to talk to you in. If you don't have a microphone, or if you just want to type, you can use this chat area. Just make note that this little I here means that all of the chats can be seen by the moderators, even if it's a private person-to-person chat. I think that's all that I need to point out. If you have any questions, type it in the chat, and I'll get to you as soon as I can.
All right, thank you very much. Let's see, we want to move to the county reports, and we have a picture. All right. Katie Shook is going to start us off with the county reports, and Katie, you actually cover several counties, do you not? And you're going to tell us what you're seeing and what's of interest to you, so take it away.
Hey, this is Katie. We're in Perquimans County today with our Master Gardener volunteers. We cover Chowan, Gates, and Perquimans counties with our program. We were going to focus on fire ants. We've been getting a lot of calls on fire ants, and I want to see if Lee J was able to get my pictures or not.
Actually, Katie, no, it came through and the file wouldn't open.
No problem. What I wanted to tell folks about was the potato chip test, an easy way to tell if you have fire ant activity or not. We encourage clients and master gardeners not to disturb fire ant mounds. When you disturb that mound, if the ants feel threatened, they're going to move the queen and start a new mound several feet away. One time I read in the Southern Living magazine, a writer or a reader wrote in, they had the perfect way to fix fire ant mounds. If you took a shovelful of mound A and put it on mound B, and took a shovelful of mound B and put it on mound A, the ants would duke it out and you'd get rid of both mounds. So obviously the ants are just moving in that case to a new area. So how to tell if you have fire ant activity without disturbing the mound is to put out something greasy nearby, a greasy food like a potato chip or a hot dog. My images were of this morning. I set a potato chip out by what I thought was an active mound, and within 5 minutes there were probably 20 fire ants on that potato chip starting to consume it. And if I had waited a little longer, we'd see even more. So I knew that I needed to treat the mound. Initially, what I would do is treat the mound, wait a week, come back and do that potato chip test again to see if the mound was still active and needed retreatment. That's all we have in Chowan Gates and Perquimans. Does anyone have any questions on that?
Any questions for Katie?
We had a question in
Okay, here we go.
We had a question in Henderson County. Do you have a recommended have too many fire ants and you yes, but we would really
Okay, Katie,
I'm sorry
are
we
you
couldn't
hearing
hear
that?
that. Whoever had the question, if you could type it in the box or try to get closer to the microphone. The recommended treatment for fire ants is a two-step process. What we recommend clients do is put out a bait on, say, day 1. You want to put out a bait-type insecticide like Amdro. Sprinkle that around the mound in about a 3-foot swath around the mound. Don't put it directly on the mound. You want the fire ants to treat it as if it was food, where they would naturally collect food, and they'll take it back into that mound. About 5 to 7 days later, you come and put on a drench-type contact insecticide. This is the insecticide that as soon as it comes in contact with the ants, it's going to kill any remaining workers instantly. Again, that's about 5 to 7 days after the bait. The reason you want to use the bait first is that you really must kill that queen to kill the mound, or else she's just going to keep having more workers. With the bait, they're going to take that food in and share it with her, and she can be several inches, up to 12 inches below the top of that mound. So unless you're killing her, pouring anything over the top of the mound is ineffective, and that includes gasoline.
All right, well, we need to take in, we can come back to Katie, she'll be around for the whole program if you have any other questions on that, but let's catch up on David Barkley down in Brunswick County. David, go ahead and take it away and tell us what you've been seeing.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay, basically we've been having a number of issues. I'll start with turf grass. We had a bad year for large patch on just about all types of our warm season grasses. The cool weather, the dampness has delayed some of our growth on especially Bermuda grass, and we've got a lot of people impatient wanting to stimulate the Bermuda grass, and so they're doing all kinds of crazy things. They fertilized back in February. We have people who just can't wait for green to grow. we're trying to get people educated not to fertilize that early and to wait until the temperatures are more appropriate for the good growth. Also, with the wet weather, we've had issues with a number of mushrooms, especially the stinkhorns, and with some of the decaying organic matter in the soil. That's quite disconcerting to breathe in some of that odor when you're out in the garden. Mole crickets are just starting, and Katie mentioned the fire ants. We have issues with fire ants as well. Good product for both, I believe, is the fipronil, which will kind of take care of both of these pest problems. Earthworms have always been an issue with us, and that causes some moles to tunnel through our yards and destroy turf areas. We have other beetles emerging, some dung beetles. We had a little bit of Japanese beetle emergence, some adults feeding on some of our shrubbery, and then they have kind of disappeared. I don't know what is going on with that. I expect that we'll be getting a lot more Japanese beetles a little bit later. And we're in this weed transition from the winter annuals to the summer annuals presently. We had a few bee swarms because of the cool weather. Our beekeepers have been busy removing swarms. We had issues with spider mites that was quite devastating on a number of our conifers through the winter and early spring months here. We're seeing oak gall, licanium scale is killing some of our branches and some of our oak trees in the botanical garden even. And we just had a lot of scale in general. San Jose T-scale on hollies, camellias, euonymus, and also cottony cushion scale. I did send you, I sent a plant clinic sample of a tomato, and I don't know if you have that you can show, but the report that I got back from Dr. Avery was that was Roundup injury, and then the other one was the pepper plant, which suspected chemical injury. That's all I have. I'll click off here.
Thanks a lot, David. And David will also be around if we've got any questions for him. So now we're going to move on to Darrell Blackwelder from Rowan County, and we're anxious to see what's going on in Rowan County. Darrell. We are having a technical glitch, but Darrell will be on in a moment.
While we wait for Darrell, there was a question that came through for Katie. Let me scroll back up through the chat. The question was, will the oily food or potato chip test work for ants other than fire ants? Katie, if you want to speak to that while we're waiting for Darrell.
I don't know. The agent there in Pasquotank County, Tom Campbell, might be able to answer that. I do know that you need to suspect it's a fire ant mound, and then the potato chip nearby will just kind of confirm that. Fire ant mounds usually don't have that central volcano-type hole on the top, and they're usually larger than other mounds. So if you suspect it's a fire ant mound, that's confirmation. But as far as being attractive for other ants, I don't know. Does any other agent have any comments on that?
My understanding was that the fire ants are attracted to the oily, greasy type foods, and other ants are attracted to sweets, sugars.
Yeah, in general, some some ants are attracted to sugars and some are attracted to oils and fats, and you don't know whether, if you're looking to treat some other kind of ant, you don't know if it's going to be attracted to potato chips or not. So it's particularly useful for the fire ant and unknown to the others. Sometimes there's a peanut butter and jelly test you can do, especially for a house ant. Put a card out with peanut butter and a little bit of jelly and see which ones they go to, and you can determine whether it's a sweet-loving or a fat-loving ant. Do we have Daryl yet?
Can you hear me?
Daryl.
Okay.
Yeah, Daryl, go ahead.
Okay. Sorry, I had a little technical difficulty here in Rowan. Thank goodness Rob Neely's here to help me try to get this set. Is my volume okay?
Yeah, you're good.
Yeah. Okay. We've been inundated in Rowan County with earwigs. I get 4 or 5, well, more than that, 10, 15 phone calls a day on earwigs. They're in my mailbox every day. One of the things that's interesting about earwigs is, some of you may have noticed this, they have an affinity for electrical contact points. I had an air conditioner compressor contact point shorted out where earwigs. They get into the electrical parts and shorted out. And I talked to the repairman. They have about 25, depending on the season, but between 25 and 50 shorts every year due to earwigs. If you don't know it, I don't have a picture of an earwig, but they're fairly easy to identify. It's an insect with looks like interesting features on their tail, ovipositor or whatever, and they seem to multiply, I assume, logarithmically with the weather. You know, I don't know. I've written several articles about it for the paper and trying to calm people down about them. I guess it's mostly weather related with the hot, humid weather we've had. We had last week about 3 inches of rain in one day, and we've had steady rains here, so it's been awfully bad with earwigs here as far as insect problems. We've also had, for control of those, you know, I guess regular outdoor household sprays, typical sprays will work, but they reproduce so quickly they just come right back. So I think it's something people are just going to have to more or less put up with as far as a nuisance type pest. We've had some people call on other items, a cicada killer. We had one lady call and scared to death of cicada killers. Earlier this year we also had carpenter bees, bumblebees calling. We've had also a few weeks ago solitary bee problems. People called about those and had problems with those also in the county. We've had a couple of swarms, like David was saying. We've had swarms here also, here in the county also. So we had a lot of scale problem, but we haven't had a huge amount of scale. And mites are not really a problem here, as David had, because we've had ample amounts of rain here. Usually when we have hot, dry conditions, we have extremely high populations of spider mites. So that's what's going on here in Rowan. Had a lot of interesting problems with corn. We've had some sweet corn that has had a phenomenon called crazy top, where the top actually withers and falls over. It looks like almost like a Roundup damage. And I sent it to the Plant Disease and Insect Clinic, and if the soil stays cold and moist for so many days, the top tends to wither and fall over. And this is it's not a very common phenomenon. And I've only seen it. The only time I've ever seen it. I thought it was Roundup damage or a herbicide damage, but it's actually a fungus that gets in the soil that causes this. It doesn't occur very often. It's a very rare disease. Any questions?
All right. Thank you very much, Daryl. I've never seen that either. So Lee J wants to remind anybody, if you have a question, if you'll raise your hand, we'll be able to catch you, and Daryl will still be here too. Let's move on to our main presentation this morning. Helen and Ann, are you there and ready to take over and tell us something about rain gardens?
We are here, thanks very much. And I'm going to try to show you a picture of us. This is a very old picture you're getting to see right now. And you can see, at least I'm a lot grayer.
I'm a lot redder.
But we're very glad to be here with you today. And before we get going too far, I had a couple of statistics actually that I wanted to show you, or share with you, I should say, and then we'll go on into our PowerPoint presentation. This are some statistics given out by the Clean Water Education Partnership. Some of the more interesting ones are stormwater pollution is the #1 source of water pollution in the United States. Polluted stormwater runoff is the #1 threat to North Carolina's water quality, which is pretty a profound statement there, that the #1 threat is runoff water that comes out of our landscapes. And then the last two that I wanted to share is 40% of U.S. rivers and streams are too polluted for fishing or swimming. And a lot of this stormwater runoff that's collected either by a stormwater collection system or that just travels straight into rivers and streams doesn't go through any sort of cleaning before it enters an open water body, such as a river or a stream or a pond. And so any pollutant that picked up in the landscape will get carried straight into that pond. And in North Carolina, more than 1/3 of water pollution comes from urban runoff. So we can be pretty effective in reducing the amount of pollution that ends up in our waterways by doing a better job of controlling water as it leaves our urban landscapes and considering what pollutants might be in that water. And so Ann and I have written a book actually on rain gardens and how to design them for the southern garden, and we're going to share a little bit of that with you today. So let's start off with the definition of a rain garden, because sometimes it's kind of not really clear what a rain garden is. A rain garden is a constructed depression in the landscape. So it's designed to catch water and trap that water in the garden. And then the garden filters the water, removing the pollutants, returning the rainfall, the runoff water back to our groundwater supply, and using the water to support the plant's growth that is in that landscape. So instead of, for example, raising a bed and berming it up, you are instead designing a garden that is slightly depressed to capture runoff water. Rain gardens have 5 basic components. The first one is the depression itself, and we'll talk about how deep that needs to be in just a few minutes. The second one is what's called the filter bed, and that is the soil that is in the garden that you have amended with organic matter, so that it's a very biologically diverse soil with lots of different soil microbes and microorganisms that help to break down pollutants. Also, the organic matter helps to bind pollutants that might be in the runoff water. And many of these pollutants in water are actually nutrients for plants. So something such as iron that is a pollutant in water is actually a plant essential nutrient. You also have to mulch the garden just like you would any garden. You make a berm to capture the water so it doesn't flow out of the garden, and then you pick plants for it. And we'll talk a little bit about the different kinds of plants that you can grow, but the good news there is you can actually have a tremendous diversity of plants growing in this garden and have season-long interest, so it can be a very beautiful addition to a home landscape. So maybe you're thinking, well, how is a rain garden different than other gardens then? And all gardens are basically defined by how much water is present in the garden. Either how much is present naturally or how much do you want to supply as an irrigation or as an outside water source. So if you start at the top left up here with this Wetland garden, you see that water has to remain standing in a wetland garden all the time. The plants cannot be allowed to dry out to survive, grow, and thrive in this wetland garden. A bog garden, the soil needs to stay well saturated all the time. It doesn't have to have standing water, but it does have to have very wet soil all the time. Dry gardens need to be just that, dry. The soil, if rainfall does fall on this soil, the soil drains very, very quickly. It doesn't hold much water. They are also designed for, or do best in areas where we do not have a lot of rainfall. These are also sometimes called xeric gardens. And xeric gardens don't do very well for us traditionally in the South because we do get too much rainfall. Where we have periods of dry, the xeric garden does okay. And then if we get into a wet period like we've had this spring, then the xeric plants are going to start not thriving very well for us. A rain garden is actually some of both. A rain garden can be both very wet and very dry. So the plant material chosen for the rain garden is plants that can thrive in both wet conditions and very dry conditions. And we'll, like I said, we'll get more into the plant material later. So why do we need a rain garden? To be a responsible gardener, a water-wise gardener. We have a rain garden to trap runoff water onto our home properties so that water can be filtered. The soil and the pollutants in that water can be removed. And you maybe don't think of soil as being a pollutant, but in fact when soil ends up in a waterway, in a lake or a stream, it is a pollutant in that lake or stream. It releases nutrients which feed algae, and algae grow and they bloom and they take over all the oxygen in the pond, and then you can have fish kills. So something that is innocuous as soil or mulch, when it ends up in a waterway, is in fact a pollutant. And then at the same time, in this rain garden, the water is retained so that the plants can grow and thrive and be beautiful also. Now, maybe you haven't really thought about the water cycle in a long time, and maybe when you do think about the water cycle, you sort of have that childhood picture in your mind of, you know, the happy cows standing out in the field under nice billowy clouds, and, you know, gentle rain falling onto agricultural fields and onto the mountains and running down into streams. And the urban landscape is not usually part of that traditional water cycle picture that you have in your mind. When rain falls on the urban landscape, the home landscape, rain falls onto the roof, say, and it washes across the shingles, and as it goes across the roof it picks up pollutants. It falls off that roof, it lands onto an impervious surface such as your driveway perhaps, or other hardscapes in your landscape, where that runoff water cannot move down to that impervious surface, cannot be filtered by the soil. And so then it runs into our stormwater collection systems or off your property in some way. So there's a variety of ways of trying to encourage water to move down through soil so that it can be filtered and removed of pollutants. One of them is using porous hardscapes, such as pavers that are set in a bed of sand where the water can pass down through that sand. And another way would be to have a rain garden where you can capture this water. As the water is drawn up by the plant, it again, via transpiration, it's released from those leaves and passes back out to the clouds where it falls down again, hopefully next time we need a good soaking rainfall. And so there's the urban landscape water cycle. I mentioned several times the different pollutants that might be in the water, and this table here shows you some of the pollutants, some of the more common pollutants and what their source is. So say something such as a metal, iron or zinc or copper, They come from roof shingles, oil from your car or grease from a car. Soil holds these metals. They are, our red clay soils are red because they have such high iron content in them. And again, in soil, iron is a plant essential nutrient. In water, it's a pollutant. So the rain garden can remove these pollutants, these metals, I should say, 43 to 97%. So a pretty effective removal there just by passing that water through the rain garden, through the filter bed instead. Phosphorus is found by detergents and fertilizers and pet waste. And again, the rain garden can be very effective in removing those pollutants, removing 65 to 87% of the phosphorus out of that runoff water. Nitrogen is a harder nutrient to manage. It's also a harder nutrient to measure precisely in laboratory analysis. And so the sources of nitrogen that pass through our urban landscapes are our fertilizers, pet waste, and organic matter. Something as simple as your mulch holds onto and contains nitrogen. And if that mulch ends up in a pond, it releases the nitrogen into that pond. We're not very good at measuring nitrogen, though, so the removal percentages from a rain garden are a bit broad, and rain gardens, we estimate, remove somewhere between 15 to 92% of the nitrogen that passes through them. Part of that's going to depend what time of the year that water moves through. If you have a lot of plants that are dormant, they're not going to absorb as much nitrogen as they would during the more active root growth times of the year. All right, so now we've talked about why we need a rain garden, what the motivation is for having a rain garden to remove and prevent these pollutants from ending up in the landscape. And we need to now look at a little bit about how can you build one, and is it a lot of effort to build one. And what we've done is try to take the recommendations put out by our ag engineering department, which are designed primarily for very large commercial sorts of situations, and try to modify those to building a rain garden that would work in the urban home landscape, and to give some approaches to building them and designing them so that they are functional and also attractive in the home landscape. So this picture we're looking at right here, you can see a home and water that runs off the roof and directed into the rain garden. You can see the parking area and water being directed into the rain garden. And then again, a mixture of plant material that is very effective in filtering and removing that runoff, or the nutrients from that runoff water. So the first thing you have to decide is where to put the rain garden. And Anne, who is a landscape horticulture faculty member in our department, has drawn several diagrams to help us understand that. If you look at this diagram with me, you can see location A is able to capture some of the runoff water as it moves across this property, and the slope of this property is from the top of the slide down to the bottom of the slide. But location A is not really viewed from the house very well. You can't see it from any of the windows of the home, which she has indicated on the diagram also. I don't know about you, but come July and August, I view most of my gardens from inside my house. Unless it's very early morning or very late in the evening, I'm not usually out in my garden too much in those times of the year when it's that hot. So if you want to be able to see the garden from the house, you need to think about that when you're designing it. Location B is able to be seen from the house. You can see it can be seen from the master bedroom windows and probably from the kitchen window. But again, it only captures some of the runoff that moves across this property. Location C would capture all the runoff, or all the runoff at least could be directed into the rain garden at location C, and is also viewed from the house quite nicely. So you need to think a little bit about how you want to see the rain garden. Do you want to see the rain garden at the same time as you're thinking about where should the rain garden be to capture the runoff water? Sometimes the best way to see how water moves across your property is to go out in the rain and walk around in your property and see where the water's going. You can take an umbrella with you, obviously, but you might want to go out and see how water is moving across your property and how you can direct, or where you might put the rain garden into a spot that would capture some of that runoff water. On this slide, this is a home landscape, and it's a sloped landscape. Again, in this case, from the bottom of the slide to the top of the slide, it slopes down. And a lot of times people will think they should put that rain garden in the bottom of the slide, at the end of the slope here. But that would actually be quite a wet location, and probably too wet for a rain garden. It might be more appropriate for a bog garden, say. For a rain garden, what you would want to do is build the rain garden in the midway point on the slope, so that you can berm up the back side of this garden and capture that runoff water. Here's another diagram of another picture, I should say, of a rain garden. And you can see a rain garden needs to be at least 10 feet from the foundation of your home. You don't want to trap moisture next to your home's foundation, so you do need to move it at least 10 feet from the foundation. And then there's the 4-inch corrugated drainage pipe that takes the runoff water from the gutter into this rain garden right here. And I love this picture because here's the storm drain. So the water would have run straight into that storm drain and taking that water into a pond, but instead it's being filtered down through this rain garden. This is a very young rain garden, so it hadn't grown up very much yet, but it was very, very nicely done. The next question after location usually is, well, how big does this rain garden have to be? And the good news there is it doesn't actually have to be quite as big as you think it does. First off, let's talk about depth. For most of our soils, 3 to 6 inches deep is an adequate depth for the rain garden. So the top of the filter bed, you might think of it, is going to be 3 to 6 inches below the natural grade of your property. So you don't have to dig all that deeply. You're not going to fall into it or lose your small dog in it or anything like that. The length then and the width of the rain garden comes to how big of an area do you want to try to capture the runoff from. That wasn't phrased very well. Let me try that one again. So you want to measure the amount of impervious surface. So how much square footage is your roof? How much square footage would your driveway be? And you add those areas of impervious surface together to calculate the total amount of impervious surface that you have to capture. And this table, which is in our book but is also on our ag engineering webpage here at the university, gives you some recommendations for the amount of impervious surface that you have on this first left-hand column, and then the required size for the rain garden, whether it be a 6-inch deep rain garden or a 3-inch deep rain garden. And then it also gives you some potential garden dimensions, just width by length kinds of measurements. So say, for example, you have 1,600 square feet of impervious area, including your driveway and the roof of your home. And that would mean that your rain garden needs to be 80 square feet, or roughly 7 by 12. So again, not a very deep rain, or not a very large rain garden. That is for a 6-inch deep rain garden. If you're going to make it just 3 inches deep, then you see you have to double the volume. You have to make it a bigger square footage then. Double the area, I should say. So you have to make it larger to be able to hold more water. Your goal here is not to hold all of the rainfall. The goal here is to capture the first inch of rainfall, because the first inch is where you have most of the pollution washed off of the surface, be it your roof or your driveway. It's called the first flush. After that first flush, the water is fairly pure, and it can pass straight into a stormwater collection system and be okay. So you're trying to capture the first inch of rainfall generally. So what we did when we were writing the book is we decided to build a rain garden so we could photograph it as we were going along. And this is actually my home landscape here. And my landscape is fairly sloped. Back up here in the upper right-hand corner of the slide is my neighbor's property, and the water, the rainfall water from his property and my property moved down through this lawn area. And what was happening is it would pass through this lawn and then pass through the opening that you see right there in the liriope, where I have a mulched walkway. And it would pass through that walkway, and it would follow the walkway and carry all the mulch from the walkway onto my driveway. So every time I had a good rainfall, I'd have to go and rake all the mulch back up off my driveway and spread it back over the walkway again. And I got tired of doing that. So we decided to construct a rain garden right here, right in front of this little liriope border, which the previous owner of my home had put in. There was a bad infestation there of microcegium also, so we sprayed Roundup and killed the microcegium first, and then we started in on the process of building this rain garden. And I'm going to turn over the microphone now to Anne, and she's going to take you through a little bit about the construction and some more design aspects of the rain garden.
And I love the fact that Helen mentioned that she does most of her gardening in July from inside her house in terms of looking outside and enjoying her garden that way, because we decided to build this rain garden, in fact, in July last year. So let's just wait until it's like the hottest time of the year, really buggy. So like Helen was saying, we located the spot and we started digging, and we went down about 8 inches. And it took us, a really good long morning to dig out this hole. And Helen has a 10-year-old son who would come out and check on us periodically during the day. And by the end, he's like, well, let me get this straight. You dug a big hole, took out the soil, and then put the soil back. It's like, actually, that's not quite true. Oops, sorry, that's fine. Let's go. Just click on it. So we dug out our hole about 8 inches for us, because we wanted to leave about 2 inches for a mulch layer. And we took most of, or some of that soil and used it to berm up on the low side of the rain garden. We do that so when we have a huge rain event, we are able to keep a lot of the rainwater in the garden and not have it flow out on the backside. So we use the berm, and then you can kind of see up in the top that there's still the liriope in place. We didn't touch that, so the water's going to stay in this garden. We also, sorry. No, it's okay. Obviously, I'm a PC person and Helen's a Mac, so we have our own little technical difficulties here. But so we amended our soil. So we used a good topsoil. We spread out about 2 inches on the top side, and we mixed that in with the soil we had removed, and then we put it back into the garden. Our publisher was shocked when we said we wanted to put this slide into the book, because we just thought it was gorgeous. Anyone who loves to garden, loves this slide too. They just cannot wait to put their hands in it. And this is what we're looking for, something that has, it's nice and light and fluffy, a lot of organic matter worked in. We're breaking up the existing compacted clay that was in there. So we have about 6 inches of this. Our garden's about 2 inches depressed on top of that. Our other goal is to slow down the flow of water. So where the water's coming down, typically in a residential site from a gutter system and then a downspout, how do you get the water to the rain garden in an attractive way, but also in a way that slows the water down? Rock is a good way to do that. On the right side, you can see that it's often done very unattractively. The rock at the top is nice, but then the riprap they've used here isn't quite so attractive. In a home landscape situation, you can actually come in and do a little swale, like a very small depressed area that leads the water in the right area. And also the rocks will slow the water down. So if you have a huge rain event, it's not going to be washing mulch away, or those sorts of things. So in Helen's case, she already had this concrete block in place, so we use that and we put that on the front side of our garden bed. She has this tremendous amount of turf area that the water's moving through before it gets to the rain garden, so that's fine. That's slowing the water down, providing a little bit of friction. But right in front of the garden, we placed these concrete blocks. She already had them on hand, and that will also slow the water down and not wash out all the mulch that we worked so hard to put in. So it's not mortared in place. Water can kind of seep through between the rocks, but it can also move over very easily. And then we planted after that, and I don't know whose slide that is. Okay. There's there's a bunch of different ways. Design-wise, you can approach a rain garden. It can look very, very formal if you want. It can look very, very naturalistic if you want. These next couple slides are a rain garden installed over in Durham by a design company, and the clients here wanted a very naturalistic look. And in this case, rainwater was coming down from this hill right here, coming down, and then also moving across the lawn. Actually, the lawn originally didn't drain very well. They had to install some drainage pipes in it, and they wanted to make it look like it was part of a natural landscape and make it look like a waterway or a course-way. So the look is very natural and it blends in essentially. And if you just look at where the turf ends, it's very hard to see what is human-built and what is natural. So in this case, we used, or we didn't use it, it was designed by someone else, but it was a part shade to shade garden, so there's a lot of shade-loving plants in here. You can put a rain garden in sun, in shade, in part shade. Basically, it ends up being choosing the plants very, very carefully, so ones that are adapted for each side. And this one is in more shade, so we used a lot of sedges like carex and acorus, and we contrasted that color and texture of those with really cool rocks. So you see the sedges, the bluey gray ones here, and then there's an acorus in the front, and that's the more yellowy leaved ones. So just those two plants combined with the rocks gives a really interesting color contrast, really fabulous texture contrast, and yet looks very natural. Again, here's just another shot. It just blends right in. It doesn't look any different than another garden, right? It just looks like it's part of the landscape. Now, you can have it as a standalone piece. This is another garden that you can see from all sides. So the water is still draining into this, and it doesn't, again, look like a weird garden type. It just looks like another beautiful garden bed that just happens to be a little more depressed underneath. So there's woody plants in here, there's perennials, you can do annuals. When you have the standalone piece that's not part of another bed, you have to make sure that you're taking very excellent account of where the other vantage points would be, since you can walk all around this one. You can see it from all sides. So the planting part is tricky. I've lived in a bunch of different places, and North Carolina is one of the trickiest places I've lived in terms of growing plants, which is also frustrating because we can grow such a variety here in terms of my yard is only so big, I can't get them all in. Helen and I joke with each other when we are shopping for plants, because she is a one of this, one of this, one of this type of person, and being the consummate designer, I'm like, no, 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 you need to have 3 of this, 5 of this. And now I think we've totally, I was going to say not totally flip-flopped, but we've kind of rubbed off on one another. I was shopping the other day, and I ended up getting one of this, one of this, one of this, and I think she bought 3 or 5 of one plant the other day for one of the first time, so pretty interesting. But in North Carolina, we're supposed to get about 42 inches of rain a year. That would be lovely if we actually got that, and if we got it in a regular pattern, but we don't. So the plants that, typically we get, a huge deluge followed by periods of very dry time, and then we get another deluge, and then it's very dry again. So the plants that go into a rain garden have to be able to stand standing water, but then also thrive and look great in periods of drought as well. We don't want things that are barely, or that are kind of limping along. We want plants in a rain garden to look good in either situation. So that means that the plants that go in have to be very adaptable in terms of doing splendidly in really wet conditions and really dry conditions. Plant architecture is another feature that should be considered in a rain garden. Anything that can kind of slow down water, capture water a little bit, and to pick up some of the the soil that might be moving through the water, or the loose mulch that's moving through. So any plant that has a very tight base system ends up being superb. So ornamental grasses are one excellent plant because they're so tight at the bottom. Any water moving through there, the debris is going to get caught in there. You don't have to have plants, all your plants don't have to look like this, but having some are excellent. So the grasses are great, the sedges are wonderful as well. The look of a rain garden can be, again, very formal. It can be very informal. When it comes down to pure aesthetics, that is an extremely personal reaction on your client's end of things. Helen and I both love this slide. It's Helianthus and the Gulf Coast muley grass. The muley is that fine textured, very light, very pink plant, but it looks very wild, and we think this is one fabulous approach. Another approach is something more tropical, kind of tropical. It's still wild, but you can have this look more contained. You'll notice in the very background of the slide, up at the top, is the dwarf palmetto. You recognize the elephant ear, sort of in the middle here. And then if you don't recognize this little white fellow in here, it's an annual called cat's whiskers. Usually that seems to get a lot of attention. It's a little hard to find, but it tends to be an annual for us when you can find it. This is a Department of Transportation planting that's a rain garden. On a larger scale, you'll notice the things we already talked about, using the rock to slow down the flow of water, incorporating woody plants, perennials. Again, you can see some ornamental grasses. So this is a very large rain garden. So again, depending on how much water you're trying to capture, it can be very large, but it can also be smaller in terms of a residential site. So I wanted to take you through some design examples just to give you an idea about plant combinations. The book that we wrote is written for homeowners essentially, and for gardeners, lay people. It's not a dry academic read. Actually, Helen and I, we think that we're pretty funny. Other people may feel differently, but there's a lot of humor in the book. It's easy to read. We think it's enjoyable to read. And after so many edits, I'm reading some of Helen's text, and it still's making me laugh out loud. But it's set up for people who need to know this information, who aren't plant professionals. So it's broken into sun adaptability. So there's a section for like sun gardens, shade gardens, part shade gardens, and we give a couple of design examples for each. And then one of the most phenomenal parts of the book is their if we don't say so ourselves, are these plant lists. So we've actually done all the research and the legwork for you and for the homeowners in terms of what plants are true showstoppers for a rain garden, which ones are really tough, which ones are really attractive in as many seasons as possible, and which ones are actually available from nurseries. There's nothing more frustrating for someone who's gardening and they see this great design magazine or a design book and they're falling in love with these plants that are in there, and then they go to the nurseries and can't find them. So the plant lists include plants that are tough as nails, they look great, provide a lot of seasonality, and they're available at local nurseries. So just to take you through one, I'll take you through this shade rain garden, but just to remind you that there are other garden examples in there. But there's a plan for each garden, and just they're keyed out. So in the book, there's like, you can see here's like a grouping A, here's plant B, here's plant C, and then I want to take you through some of the pictures. Helen and I have very different tastes on plants, and I admit that I'm a plant snob. If anything becomes really common, then I don't really want it anymore. But what's been fun about working with Helen is that she's been turning me on to new cultivars or plants that I didn't think that I liked that I do. And one of the plants that actually does great in a rain garden is Nandina. It's tough as nails. You see it all around here, but there are some newer cultivars out. There's this white-berried Nandina. There's some orangish-berried ones, and we were presenting within the last week, and we saw an example of a really, really fern leaf, delicate leafed one. So there's a lot to choose from. But what we want to do in a garden is combine evergreen plants and deciduous plants. Kind of give a structure to a garden so you can kind of weave your perennials in and out through all of it. But when the perennials aren't doing their thing in the winter, then the garden still looks great. So just to look at the plan really quickly, you'll notice that, for an example, there could be, 3 Nandina here. They're backed by this great Florida anise behind it. So now you have, looking at this texture in the foliage, very fine textured with the Nandina, a little bit coarser with the anise, different flowering, different fruiting times. Behind the anise is a new purple-leaved elderberry cultivar. It's called Black Lace. You can see that it's very fern leaf, very delicate. So anytime you're combining like a purple foliage with a lighter green, that's a great contrast as well. So those are pretty big plants, and most of the gardens we focused on in the book are on the smaller size. We didn't include trees because most home rain gardens are going to be on the smaller side. So there's the anise here, the elderberry here, and then you can see there's another single specimen here. But then in terms of design, you can see how things are wrapped around one another. Here's, actually let me go to the next slide. And you can see this is the same plan, but all the plant massings and the groupings here, they do kind of wrap around one another and they overlap and they knit. So E is this sweetspire right in here. So that's this picture on the left. It has white flowers in early summer, fabulous fall color in the fall, obviously. So there's 3 here, and then in front of it was at the medium, so it's a little bit lower. That kind of snakes in and around. D is in a chorus, so you can see how there isn't a mass that starts and stops. Everything hugs one another essentially. A great example is over back on the A side. So this illumination vinca right here kind of wraps around the Nandina that I just talked about. In terms of pairing perennials and shrubs, you can look at the cardinal flower, that is H, this red. That's a great perennial that does has these red spiky flowers in the summer, and it's nestled between that vinca in front and there's a cuba behind. So here's 3 of the acubas, and here's a picture of that acuba here. And that's another plant that I'm like, yeah, we see that around town all the time. I'm not that interested. But then Helen shows me this great long-leafed plain green one. I'm like, now that is beautiful. It looks very tropical. So there's 3 of those in the middle, and then the cardinal flowers in front, and then this yellow and green vinca. So there's a lot of color diversity, a lot of texture diversity. When the cardinal flower is gone in the winter, you actually don't miss it because you still have the color from the vinca in front and this tropical look of the cuba behind. And then just a few other plants in there. The leatherleaf mahonia is a great one, and that does splendid for us. There are some with the really bright blue berries, that's evergreen. The caryxes also, you can get a lot of different foliage colors. And again, I mentioned they can be green, they can be yellow. You can have things that are very ephemeral, like the Virginia bluebells. They come up, there's a sweep of blue, and then they essentially disappear for the rest of the year. That's fine. And then one of the things when we're looking at color is you can have either very subtle gradations of color, or they can be more in your face. Obviously, Helen and I like more, chartreuse greens paired with purple. That just, it's just lovely. If that's your thing, that's great. If you don't like it, that's fine too. You can do something that's a little more subtle. One of the things design-wise that is fun to consider is how two plants actually augment each other. Like the dwarf palmetto looks spectacular by its own, but when it's paired with the bugleweed, which is to the right of it, then it makes the dwarf palmetto even that much more purple. So, and the plants that are included on the plant list, they are also fairly well behaved. Although I kind of have to add the caveat that plants don't read books, so there's always going to be an exception. We had one audience member at another presentation say, well, bugleweed has always escaped for me, and sometimes it does for people and sometimes it doesn't. The newer cultivars tend to not be as aggressive, but Helen and I also don't, we like ground covers that blend together, and it's kind of nice to see, well, what would happen when this guy is planted with the ajuga, and we'll just see who win if they were duking it out. So that's just a look that we like, but most of the plants on the plant list are very well behaved. So there's examples for the rain garden, there's examples for the part shade garden, and the suggestions in there are just general design suggestions in terms of layering and massing and plant combinations. All the seasonal characteristics of the plants are given on the plant list. So it ends up being a very helpful guide. Daryl was asking at the beginning of the book about ordering, and probably the easiest way is just to order it directly from the publisher, which is Eno, as in Eno the river, E-N-O, publishers.org. And they have a bunch, and I think they might discount it a little bit, plus they have, well, they're not going to run out. It's also available at local bookstores in larger areas. Some bookstores have had trouble keeping it in stock, so it might just be quickest to go to the publisher. At this point, we'd be more than delighted to entertain any questions you may have.
We have time for a question or two for either of them. Raise your hands, Legia is reminding us. Are edible plants good choices for a rain garden?
I'm sorry, I forgot to push my microphone. Edible plants, okay. Are they good choices for a rain garden? Research has shown that if a plant picks up a metal, for example, from water, then the metal will not end up in the fruit. So the plants sequester those heavy metals away from the fruit. So that's a good news thing about the edible plants, is that you don't have to worry about any sort of uptake into the fruit. However, I don't actually know of any edible plants that will survive both periods of standing water and periods of drought, extended drought. So unless I'm mistaken about that, I did forget to say when I was speaking that the water in a rain garden should only stand for 2 to 3 days. And that's because we don't want to breed mosquitoes in these rain gardens, and the life cycle of a mosquito is roughly 10 days. So water standing is not as much of an issue as the fact that the rain garden could get very, very dry during periods where we don't have any rainfall. So I think edible plants are probably not the best choice, but you surely can try them.
Okay, we got about 10 questions in maybe 2 minutes. Do you want to pick out any of those, or did you see them? Let's see. Estimated
I
price
do see
of
some other questions, and I
shade
understand that we're short on time now. We don't actually have any sort of price cost estimates for the rain garden that we designed from the question from Randolph County there. It would depend on, you know, local plant prices and things like that. So I'm afraid I can't provide any information there.
Let's take one more
Cranberries,
question.
Michelle Wallace is asking about cranberries. Cranberries might work in a rain garden. I'm not familiar with how drought tolerant cranberries are, so I'd have to look into that myself.
Okay, let's see.
I'm reading the
last
question
one.
about the depth of the rain garden. We created a fairly consistent depth. We tapered the edges of the rain garden in slightly, but basically the whole rain garden was 3 inches below grade. You could make it deeper into one area and have more water congregate, I would say. But I think the broader idea is to sort of make a flat pan and try to capture the water into this flat pan of the rain garden. Cindy, does that answer your question about the depth of the rain garden? I'm sorry, I guess Cindy might not actually. Oh, there she is.
Okay, we should probably move on, but I think Helen and Ann would be amenable to some of these questions by email, if that's all right, and the standard first _ last name would work. Is that all right with you all?
Yes, that'll work for reaching both of us. So we're both just at mtsu.edu.
All right, very good. We really appreciate that. Let's show them some appreciation with those clapped hands, you all. Very good. And I'd like to say thank you too. Woohoo! All right. This was very excellent. Now we need to move on to our normal or our usual feature. And we're going to start off with Mike Munster from the Plant Disease and Insect Clinic. Mike, if you are ready to share with us what you have today.
All right, I'm ready. Can everyone hear me okay? Give me a little check if you can hear me, please.
There's some lady in the back row who can't hear you so well, but other than that, I think we're all good.
All right. Well, good morning, everyone, and I'll just run through a few of the current diseases that we have going on at this time. I'm going to start out with some things that we've just been seeing right around campus here, but then talk about a few that have come in as samples from across the state. Also, as promised last time, I'll include more things about vegetables, which have come into their own now, but without ignoring the ornamentals as well. And this time of year, of course, we have to a fuerzas, as they say in Spanish, talk about the powdery mildews, since that is that time of year. This is a coreopsis from in front of my house, which you can see has some nice powdery mildew. I was going to let everyone use their text tool here to type onto this blank slide the things in which they often see powdery mildew, but in the interest of time, I think we can just all remember we see it a lot on euonymus, monarda, phlox, if you're in areas that have phlox, saucer magnolia, a lot of plants, zinnia. Someone threw up dogwood. That's good because that's one of the ones that I wanted to actually mention. Crepe myrtle, very good. The two plants that powdery mildew can fool you on are, in fact, one of them is dogwood. And let me just go on to the next slide here and explain why. On dogwood, many times you'll get your choose my pointer here. You'll get the typical powdery mildew signs actually of the fungus, the sporulation and the mycelium of the fungus. But on dogwood, it can happen that it just forms blotches that look a lot like drought stress or heat stress, and the sporulation and the mycelial growth of the fungus is so thin that unless you hold it at an angle to the light or hold a hand lens up to it, you could mistake it for one of those other problems. This is a plant just out in not too many yards from where I'm speaking to you. If you take that leaf and put it under the dissecting scope at an angle, you can see we call them conidiophores, holding up chains of the spores called conidia that then blow away on the wind and start new infections on other dogwood trees. One of the good things about the powdery mildews, if you want to think of it this way, is that they are fairly specific to their hosts. So the ones that you were mentioning before, the one from roses is not going to get on crepe myrtle, the one from crepe myrtle is not going to get on dogwood, and so forth. They tend to be restricted, at least within host families. And another point to remember, and I think it was very well said by Helen and Ann, that you need to do a lot of planning with your gardening. If you get the chance to talk to people before they actually put plants in the landscape, remind them to consider disease resistance as one of the factors in their choice of plant material. There are species of dogwood, for example, like this one, which I'm not sure which it is, but it's just a few feet away from the tree that I showed you the picture of previously. It's not Cornus florida, it's not Cornus cusa, it's one of the others that is very clean. It's taken the same day yesterday as that other picture. And folks up at Tennessee have worked since quite a while back on some cultivars of Cornus florida with resistance to powdery mildew. So keep that all in mind. As far as chemical control, there are some things that could be used by the homeowner for chemical control of powdery mildew on dogwood. I wouldn't really consider that first choice of action. And again, as we were saying last week, applications to trees are tricky, and you're really talking about looking at getting a professional tree person to come and do some of that work for you. So I would say that this would be a disease where possible to leave alone. The other host plant on which powdery mildew can trick you is leucothoe. This is not a recent picture, it's from our archives, but it forms red spots, and here the sporulation is seen on the underside of the leaf. But if you see those bright red spots on leucothoe, the first thing you should look for, get your hand lens out and see if there isn't a small colony of powdery mildew there triggering that. Another sight seen often around here these days has been the daylily with this disease called daylily leaf streak, caused by a fungus that goes by several names, one of which is Aureobasidium microstictum. And the typical symptom here is necrotic or dead spot on the leaf that runs up the middle from the tip toward the base with leading yellow area there, chlorosis, and this is caused by, as I sort of said, I guess, the fungus, Aureobasidium, and the spores are produced in that dead tissue. We're getting now into the time of year with these temperatures above 90 now where this disease should be slowing down. If you were going to use any kind of chemical control, it would have been from the time the leaves started coming out until maybe about this time. I couldn't tell you exactly when you'd have to stop, but now we should see the disease slowing down as the warm weather gets here. But do be sure and clean these out at the end of the season at the very latest so that we don't have inoculum for the disease to get an early start next year. It's interesting that there are different cultivars of daylily which are resistant to this or have different susceptibilities to this particular fungus. The list is kind of old though, so it may not include some of the newer cultivars, and now with the fact that we've got daylily rust in the United States, you've got to take into consideration the susceptibility to rust as well as to leaf streak when you're choosing your cultivar. One more here from campus. This Japanese maple was brought to us in the back of a pickup truck from our athletic department actually from a planting that they had, and it turned out, you can't see it too terribly well here, but it turned out that this had armillaria root rot, also known as mushroom root rot, and you can just barely see some of the mycelial fans, they're called, of the fungus under the bark at the base of the tree. This tends to be a problem where there was an old stump or something that the fungus was living off of, and then from there moved into a new tree or shrub planted on that site. So if you've got this disease, make sure you get as much of the old material out as you can, and also be sure to try and keep your trees and shrubs with as little stress as possible, since a stressed tree is going to be more susceptible than one that is growing well. All right, now let me jump onto a few of the samples that we've seen in the clinic here, and we'll pose this question. If we could get set up with the multiple choice, please, Leanne, for the choices, and see what you think the cause of this particular problem. The client had said that the plant was fine 2 weeks before, and then now is looking like this. So click A, B, C, D, or E on the top there if you think, or to indicate what you think the cause of this was. Now the plant is coral bells, it's heuchera. All right, we've got several people saying C here, and one with E and one with B. All right, Sean Banks, you have had the correct response here. It is southern blight. Let me mention, by the way, that Granville wilt and southern bacterial wilt are two different names for diseases caused by the same bacterium. It's just if it's on tobacco, it's called Granville wilt. And here, if we examine the bottom of this heuchera plant closely, we'll see the mycelium of the fungus growing there. And the best diagnostic characteristic, if it's present, is the little sclerotia, which look like tan-colored BBs that will eventually form on this plant tissue and allow the fungus to survive periods of adversity. There are several things. Well, let me first make this comparison. I noticed a lot of people thought that could have been southern bacterial wilt, and I wanted to do a quick comparison here between the two diseases, which are in some ways similar in that they cause a sudden wilting and death of the plant. One is caused by a fungus, again Sclerotium ralphsii is the name. The other is caused by a bacterium that's now known as Ralstonia solanacearum. If you've been around for a while, you may know it as Pseudomonas solanacearum. And the visible signs of the fungus may often be present when you've got southern blight, but there will be no outward signs of the pathogen, the bacterium, in the case of southern bacterial wilt. One big difference is the large number of plant species that can be attacked by the Sclerotium ralphsii, whereas the southern bacterial wilt, at least the race that we deal with here, is restricted to members of the Solanaceae, so your tobacco, your tomato, pepper, and relatives, and some of the composites such as dahlia and marigold, and a few others. They both have the very nasty characteristic of being quite persistent in the soil. So if you were to try and use rotation as a method of reducing your southern blight problem, you would have to go at least 2 years without planting a host. And since there are so many hosts, you're probably talking about some kind of, well, for example, corn would not be a host, wheat, the grass plants in the grass family. The question here was, does that blight start as small orange dots really close together that turn brown? No, it does not. This would be something that attacks at the soil line, and the plant then dries up as the base of the plant is being attacked and consumed by the fungus. And here's a sample that came in from Richmond County a few days ago, a tomato plant with this kind of spotting and leaf discoloration. And it turns out that this is actually a virus disease called tomato spotted wilt. some of these spots you might say, oh, it looks like early blight or some other fungal disease, but after incubation in the moist chamber, nothing came out of this of significance as far as fungi, but the plant did test positive with a little immunostrip test that we have. It looks a lot like a pregnancy test. It told us that the tomato spotted wilt virus was present in this plant. And this is a very destructive virus disease that has hundreds of host plants which it can attack. And there's really nothing that can be done about it. The good thing, I guess you'd say, about this disease is that it moves in from the weeds around on thrips, which are the vectors which carry the disease. But after that first wave of thrips, you're not probably going to get any secondary spread within your garden. But this can cause a total loss of plants. We also, not too long ago, got a potato sample that looked in pretty bad shape and had this particular virus. A quick review of a few points that are good to know about plant virus diseases. One is that their seriousness varies. Some viruses on some plants will actually be symptomless. There'll be no apparent damage to the plant, or maybe a growth reduction that you would only know comparing it to an uninfected plant, and all the way up to a seriousness as serious as killing the host plant. Host ranges, some viruses like tomato spotted wilt can attack the hundreds of host species, as I mentioned, whereas others are so narrow, like grape fanleaf virus, that only attacks one species of plant, the grape. Very important, virus diseases of plants are incurable. Once the plant has a virus infection, it will remain infected for the rest of its life, unless you have the ability to do meristem tip culture and start a new line. But for most homeowners, that's pretty much out of the question. So you have to realize that. And the important point there is that any plant propagated vegetatively from that, let's say a plant that you've got infected that you're propagating by division or rooting of stems, this sort of thing, budding, grafting, that virus is going to be in the progeny as well. With botanical seed, true seed, the transmission of viruses is much less common. The agents that move viruses around, or their vectors, are also variable and depend on the virus. A few of them only are able to be moved on your hands or tools, such as famously tobacco mosaic virus and tomato mosaic virus, which are quite related, and hostavirus X, which is said to be possibly be transmitted through lawnmowers and weed eaters, although I'm not quite sure why you'd be lawn mowing and weed eating your hosta bed, but those are examples of mechanically transmissible viruses. Many viruses are transmissible by insects, such as cucumber mosaic virus by aphids and TSWV INSV by thrips, and several other examples. And also to keep in mind that weeds can be reservoirs for these. Viruses can survive over the winter in weed hosts and then move in the growing season onto your garden. All right, there's a question as to whether or not there are virus-resistant varieties. Yes, there are. In some host plants, there is resistance available to some viruses. Now, in the case of TSWV, that's proven to be tricky. I don't know of any offhand, but it's turned out that the virus has become, or is able to overcome those resistances after a period of time. Interesting question that our department head actually has been studying in his laboratory. But I couldn't tell you off the top of my head or give you a recommendation of any tomato plant that I would know that would be resistant to TSWV. Here is the example that was mentioned at the top of the program here from Brunswick County, the tomato. This is a classic case of glyphosate injury on tomato. It's a very sensitive plant, and the typical thing that happens is in the growing point, on some of the leaflets, especially the lower leaflets, and especially the lower half of the lower leaflets, you get this bright yellow discoloration. And that plant just got a small dose of Roundup at some point, and this is what the result is. We had another sample similar to this in a couple of weeks before. The interesting thing too, I remember a case where there was a garden that had beans that were fine, closer to the exposure of Roundup than the tomatoes, which were behind them, but because of the high sensitivity of this plant, this is the one that showed the damage. Oops. Sorry about that. All right, another sample that we got in here was a cucumber plant from Currituck County, received toward the end of May. And I'm going to poll you again here. See if folks could take a guess at what the cause of this particular problem on the cucumber is. I don't see many letters popping up. You must be consulting, which is good. All right. People are very shy here, not wanting to venture a guess, but so far I haven't seen the right answer pop up. This, oddly enough, if you look down at the roots, this plant had root knot nematode, which was stressing out the foliage because it was not able to, of course, get the water and nutrients that it needed. Very often we'll see a first symptom of this as the wilting of a plant during the heat of the day, but then it'll recover and when the transpiration stress, the water stress is less. And it's just a reminder to always look at the roots to check to see if the cause of the problem may be down there with a root rot, or in this case a nematode. And a reminder that not all nematodes cause galling on the roots. We know about the destruction that root knot nematode does, but they are little silent thieves that are attacking the roots of our plants in many cases without us being aware of it. This particular disease here caused a stir. Those of you who read Pest News are aware of the situation. This is a cucumber leaf from Franklin County that came into the clinic just back last Thursday, and many of you may recognize this disease. It has angular leaf spots that start out as just yellow spots, chlorotic spots, but then become dead in the center and tend to be limited by the veins. If you look, if you look at the underside, you may see a little bit of the sporulation of the fungus in this case, or a fungus-like organism if you want to be real picky about it. And this is the downy mildew of cucurbits. It is an interesting case because it showed up in Franklin County, and it's something that doesn't survive the winter here, so we expect it to move up from warmer places. But there's the closest site to us that people are aware of with downy mildew of cucurbits is in South Georgia. So there isn't any in South Carolina or Virginia, but here in North Carolina we have it. So this is something that is going to be something to watch in cucurbits. And it's blown around on the wind, which is why I've got this interesting wind vane picture from campus here. And anyone who's involved with commercial production of cucurbits should be aware of and paying attention to the cucurbit downy mildew forecast homepage. And there is the address there, the URL, where they take the weather forecast and the known locations of downy mildew and try and predict what areas are going to be in danger. This will get on the different cucurbits. I've seen it do particular destruction to cantaloupe. So it's something to be aware of. Unfortunately, for the home gardener, the products that would be able to be used, such as a mancozeb or a chlorothalonil, are not going to be the most effective things. There are, again, I believe there is some resistance out there if you plan ahead and plant your cucurbits with resistant varieties. All right. Let me ask then if there are any questions about diseases, either ones I presented or others that you may have encountered in the month that has passed here since the last session. If not, then I will pass the microphone to my entomological comrade, David Steffen.
Okay, thank you, Mike. assume folks can hear me here. Everybody was already checked in with Mike. And I'll try not to be quite as klutzy this week as I was last week with clicking on slides. I'm going to start out some of the insects that we've had come in during the past few weeks, some things that I've gone out and collected myself around. This is some specimens that came in a couple of weeks ago. I'm going to go to the second slide, actually. It's a species called the carrot beetle. Now, this is one of our scarab beetles, and the larvae of scarab beetles are commonly known as white grubs. And, of course, white grubs are well known for being, in many species, being damaging to the roots of plants. Some species of scarab beetles cause damage more damage in the adult stage or in both the larval and the adult stage. Probably the Japanese beetle is one of our most infamous examples of that, causing damage to foliage and flowers as an adult and to the roots of grasses and other plants as a larva. But this is a species that is found here in North Carolina. The adults are about in half to 3/4 of an inch long, sort of a chestnut brown color. And we don't get the larvae of this species sent in very often. It's usually the adults that are reported doing the damage. And of course, as the name implies, they will feed on the roots of carrot. They're good burrowers. They'll burrow in carrot. They're also seem to enjoy some other species of plants as well, especially sunflower. We've had quite a few records over the years of this thing attacking the roots or the lower stalk of sunflower. Occasionally in marigold, also certain weeds like cockleburr and ragweed. In fact, one time we had a fellow send some of these in that were attacking cockleburr, and he was very enthusiastic about it and was hoping that this could be some new biocontrol for cockleburr. And he was probably a little disappointed to learn that this is actually a pest species that probably could not be adapted to use for biocontrol. But this is one that's up and trucking along across the table. Scarab beetles are very popular with insect collectors. They include some of the largest species of beetles in the world and some of the most bizarrely ornamented beetles like the Hercules beetles and the ox beetle or rhinoceros beetle and so forth. And then, but most of them are rather much more plainly ornamented and don't have a whole lot of attractiveness going on for them. Move on to some of the true bugs that we get in. Unfortunately, this was not a great image. This was an image sent to us. And these are the nymphs of a species of stink bug. And we usually think of stink bugs as being plant pests, but there are some genera of stink bugs that are actually predators on other insects. And this is one of the predator species. And this goes by the lovely, it goes by the, I'm sorry, I guess we didn't get the name up there. Try one more. Nope. I'm sorry, I messed up again. Excuse me while Mike rescues me. All right, sorry for that, folks. I made a technical blunder here, and Mike's trying to figure out where I am. Oh, there it was. Okay. Eutherynchus floridanus is the scientific name for this thing. It really doesn't have a common name. I don't have images of adults, but I do have another image of the nymph. And what's really interesting about these things is that although they're predators, they are also gregarious like this in the nymphal stage. And I've seen a number of reports of them by the dozens gathered together like this, and seen even a few remarkable images crawling along the boards on a deck where a group of smaller nymphs was following a larger nymph, sort of a follow the leader sort of thing. And I have not seen any information online about how these things hunt. Do they separate and go off their separate ways to find prey and then come back together again, or do they hunt like a wolf pack? I don't know, but it's a very interesting species of stink bug. Here's a little bit closer image of a nymph. This was found on the base of an apple tree in Stanley County, and this one is nearly mature, and it's got these wing pads here where once it sheds its skin probably one more time, the adult will emerge fully developed. And the adult's sort of a beautiful blue-green color with some orange spots on the abdomen. even though it's a predator, it doesn't seem to be inclined to bite. I've never heard of anybody being bitten by these things, but if you should see these guys on your plants, the best thing to do is just leave them there because they're probably feeding on something, not the plant. Now, I think last year I had some images of some leaf-footed bugs that were found on magnolia. And again, these are some images that were sent to us. They're unfortunately not very sharp. But these were collected on cilantro that somebody is growing in their garden. And these are the young nymphs of a species of leaf-footed bug. I can't identify which species they are from the nymphal stage. But they feed on a wide variety of fruit and vegetable plants. And this genus Leptoglossus is a good example of where some species in the genus may be very general feeders, such as the one that we see pictured here, whereas certain other species in the genus may be very host-specific. And the ones that I had at this conference last year were feeding on the magnolia, feeding on the fruit of the southern magnolia tree. They also feed on some of the other magnolia species. And there's another species in this area that is found only on pines, feeding on the young green cones of pine. So these guys can be controlled probably by any of the usual pesticides recommended for controlling true bugs in the garden. And they may damage the fruits, causing some discoloration to the fruits, maybe even some deformation of the fruits. But they're going to be mostly attracted to the fruits and to the blossoms of the host plant, and probably not render the plant inedible, but certainly unsightly. Now, another species of well, as I said with stink bugs earlier, most of them are plant feeders, and this is one that I reared from a couple of nymphs that came in from a graduate student here in forestry who's working with a plant called black cottonwood, which is native to the west coast of North America, but they're growing it here experimentally in the east. And she had a couple of nymphs, and I was able to rear the adults out, feeding them on willow. Many insects that feed on poplar will also feed on willow, and vice versa. So this genus, Euschistus, is a very important agricultural genus and in the home garden because they'll feed on a wide variety of vegetable plants and can cause damage to the fruit by their feeding activity. They have a beak like all true bugs, a beak like a hypodermic needle that they insert into the plant tissue, and they'll suck the sap out. They may secrete something in their saliva which causes the localized discoloration or a localized corkiness. I say corkiness to the plant tissue that does not make the fruit inedible, but certainly makes it unsightly and will not sell very well. But we have 3 or 4 or 5 species of Euschistus stink bugs. They all look pretty much alike. They're about a 1/3 to a 1/2 inch long, shades of brown and gray in color, and say all of them can be considered crop pests. Now, I did talk about scale insects a little bit last week, but we had a sample come in, last month. About last week we had a sample come in that really knocked my socks off. And this is a rosebay rhododendron that's being grown in Polk County. And at first glance, you wonder, what sort of horrible disease does this rosebay rhododendron have? But when I looked at it more closely, it turned out to have a heavy infestation of a scale insect, this one called the Townsend scale, Abrolaspis townsendi. And it's a species that I have seen many times before, especially on some of the hollies coming in here. But I had never gotten a rhododendron with a scale on it, and this was probably the heaviest infestation that I have ever, of the scale that I've ever seen on any plant. And not just the abundance of the scales was interesting, but I'm going to back up here. This discoloration, all this yellow flecking and blotching on here, I don't know if that's entirely attributable to the scales, because I've never seen this degree of heavy damage caused by this scale before. Maybe it's a sensitivity issue. The rhododendron is just very susceptible to whatever it is that the scales are producing while they feed. Nevertheless, this was, I say, an exciting sample both for the damage and for the density of the scales. Now, in this image here, we got just kind of a general view, and I think, sorry, I was using the wrong. Do I click on this one? Okay. This is an adult female scale here, and all right, drag over here. These are a couple of adult males. Generally, male scale insects are much smaller than the females, and the shell that they secrete is of a different shape. And male scale insects go through a somewhat different developmental series of stages than the females. Now, excuse me, Mike, which one I get to get the... Okay. Now, this is the shell that we've secreted by the scales. The female scale, this one here, they have glands, hundreds or even thousands of tiny little wax and oil secreting glands all over the surface of their body, and they'll produce this distinctive shell, which covers and protects the body, but is not attached to the body. And in this case, we just kind of lifted it like a lid, flipped it over. So we have the adult female here, and then we have two male pupae of scale insects right here, and you can see how they corresponded to the shells that have been lifted off them. And they do have a true pupal stage. You can see the eyes developing in these males, and when they hatch, or when they emerge would be the proper term, they look somewhat like tiny thrips, or maybe some like weird parasitoid wasp that would be running around looking for a host to parasitize. But males don't even have functional mouth parts. They're only going to live for a couple of days, just long enough to find a female and mate, and then they die. But once the female has mated, she's ready to lay eggs. And I'm sorry, just one more close-up here of to the male pupae, and these are actually alive, and they were moving slowly as we looked at them under the scope. But again, you can see the eye spots here. And now here is an adult female that has started to lay eggs, and some of these armored scales may lay a couple hundred eggs that are all together in one place. This species seems to lay a small number of eggs over a period of time, so see here we have some of the hatched out shells of eggs that have already emerged, or the crawlers have emerged. It's a little hard to see, but this is actually a crawler here that has just emerged from its egg and is about to leave the female, and then here are some of the eggs here. And for scale, this is the tip of an insect pin. The very point is actually embedded in the leaf tissue to give you an idea of how small these things really are. The scale itself, the body of the female, is probably no more than 1 millimeter in diameter, and we need to mount these things on microscope slides in order to accurately identify them. Now, we encountered this object here while we're looking at the scales, and let's see if we've got, yes, we've got this here. Okay, I'm going to play a little guessing game like Mike does. So I'm going to ask you, is people to weigh in with this with a vote? Is this a pile of old ropes? Is it a pile of iron ore slag? Is it a brittle sea starfish? Is it snail poop? Or is it none of the above? And let's see, some people are weighing in, and we obviously have some very astute entomologists out there. Everybody's guessing correctly. This is snail poop or slug poop, and I didn't see any damage, any actual injury from snails or slugs on the foliage, but one had been there and left quite an impressive pile behind. And you'll get this elongated ribbon, often coiled up, just brown material that's left on leaves where they feed. Most snails and slugs are going to be feeding on plant tissue, or they're going to be feeding on mushrooms and fungi. Some species are predators. They eat other snails or possibly other things. But snails may be a problem in the home garden, feeding on vegetable plants or bedding plants. Not usually much of a problem on woody plants. So I'm not sure what this snail would have been doing up on this rhododendron. Maybe he was just admiring the scales, or who knows, maybe he was even feeding on some of them. Okay, I'm going to move on now again and talk about some flies that we've had come in. And every year we get samples of dark-winged fungus gnat larvae that people find crawling across their driveways or carports, usually in a snake-like ribbon like this. This is about 2.5 feet long, according to the homeowner. And what happens is you'll get hundreds or even thousands of these larvae coming together in these aggregations, and then they're migrating. Usually they're in the elongated ribbon like you saw in the first image, but sometimes you get piles of them like this, and I'm wondering, in fact, these are getting caught out in the sunshine, and they're panicking because they're getting heated up and drying out, and maybe they're just coming together in a mass like this to avoid desiccation. But they are coming out of the soil, and they are traveling from one place to another, and we don't really understand what's going on with these dark-winged fungus gnats. As the name implies, the larvae of dark-winged fungus gnats feed on fungi for the most part, or on decaying organic material. And the larvae that we see in these masses usually appear to be mature larvae. They're full-sized, 1/4 to 1/3 of an inch long. They're kind of an off-white color. If you look at them closely, you can see the dark material. That's actually the partially digested food within their intestines. And they seem to be moving as if they are either looking for a place to pupate, or they're looking for a new food source. It's a well-known phenomenon, but it's impossible to predict exactly where they're going to occur or when they're going to occur. And I've never personally witnessed one of these things myself. I would love to someday, to be able to just follow them around for a few hours and see where they go. I've seen the adults of what I presume is this species in my yard on occasion, sometimes very abundant, but I've never been fortunate enough to encounter one of these crawling masses of these dark-winged fungus gnats. The important thing to keep in mind is that they are harmless. They're not going to cause any damage to the lawn or to any other plants in the landscape. They are just an interesting phenomenon, and one thing that I have also seen in some of the images we've gotten is sometimes much larger fly maggots moving with them. And I'm wondering, are these some other species of fly that was feeding in the same food source with the maggots, or is maybe this some sort of predatory fly that's traveling with them, just like wolves would travel with a herd of caribou, picking off the stragglers as they go? Some people have reported seeing ants or even small beetles running around at the edges of these things, nipping at them, sometimes apparently causing the mass to change direction as they move. It's a fascinating bit of natural history, and it's something that I would love to, like I say, personally witness myself sometime. Okay, now this one is my favorite of the month. It's almost axiomatic among biologists that the more repellent and repulsive something is to general people, the more fascinating it is to biologists. And nothing could be truer than with these so-called warble flies or bot flies. And this belongs to a group of flies medium to large in size. Some of them are over an inch long. There's only a couple hundred species of these things worldwide, but all of them are parasites of mammals. Some of them are parasites in the stomachs and intestinal tracts of animals, such as the horse botflies, which are not native to this country. They came over here with horses from Europe. There are a few species that are parasites within the nasal cavities of deer and elk and moose and caribou in the northern North America. But most of them are skin parasites of various animals, and most of the animals they parasitize are hoofed animals: cattle, deer, not horses, African antelope, even the largest things, elephants, rhinoceros, hippos, are parasitized by species of these things. And each species of warble tends to be very host-specific, occurring in just a few closely related species of animals. And here in the United States, we don't have very many, and the majority of them belong to this genus Cuterebra, which are parasites in the skin of rodents such as mice, chipmunks, and squirrels, or in rabbits. And none of them are reported to be parasites of any other kind of animal, at least on a normal basis. Now, what's interesting is that worldwide, let's say the majority of these warbles and bots are found in hoofed animals, some in rodents. There are a few that are reported from primates, monkeys in South America, and one of those species does occasionally parasitize humans. But none of them are reported from any of the carnivores. None of the cats or dogs or any of their relatives are normal hosts for any of these bots and warbles anywhere in the world. Now, occasionally, an accidental transfer of a larva to an inappropriate host will occur, and then there can be problems. But when the warble is infesting one of its normal hosts, there seems to be relatively little damage done to the animal. Now you stop and think about it a moment. This thing is nearly an inch long. This was captured, an image in Person County. Folks found it on a farm. It probably just emerged from its pupa. And this one particular one is a parasite of cottontail rabbits, and this probably wouldn't even attack any domestic rabbits, which are descended from European species. But in the normal hosts, they don't seem to cause any permanent damage or much discomfort to the animal. Even something as small as a white-footed mouse, it may have one of these flies. And that would be sort of the equivalent of a human carrying around some sort of parasite about the size of a football embedded in their skin. And yet when the larva is mature, it will back out through an opening that is kept in the skin and drop to the soil, and the animal seems to recover without any serious injury, which is important because if the larva is going to survive long enough to reach maturity, it can't be damaging its host. It can't be making it ill or inconvenienced in too many ways, or the host would be quickly picked off by predators. So these guys are true parasites. They don't seem to cause permanent damage to their host animals, and they usually have one generation a year. The adults lay their eggs on foliage around where the animals are likely to be found, and then the larvae hatch out as they detect the warmth of the animal approaching. But say these are not pests of humans or livestock or pets here in the United States. They're just a fascinating group of critters. Now, I'm going to see we have just something called Other Cool Stuff, and I missed it earlier, but I understand that somebody was talking about earwigs in air conditioners. Now, this particular species is the European earwig, and the males have the somewhat larger and more ornamented forceps or cerci at the tail end of the abdomen. The females have simpler cerci. We do have some native species of earwigs here in the United States, but most of them tend to be rather reclusive, and people don't normally encounter them. They occur in the loose bark on dead trees, in the soil. This one species, the European earwig, does tend to be a nuisance sometimes in gardens or getting into homes. This particular male was a real hoss. He was nearly an inch long and probably the largest earwig I've ever seen. This is a more normal-sized male, and they're quite sociable. They don't fight with each other. They may be gathered together in large numbers, hiding during the daytime. They will sometimes cause damage to plants feeding on foliage or getting into the flowers of plants, and may cause damage that way. And certainly they're a nuisance getting into homes. And I understand somebody said something about these things getting into air conditioning units and shorting them out. Somebody correct me if I was incorrect with that, because I missed the presentation. But they have one generation a year. The adults are active now. They will lay eggs, and the females will stay with the eggs and guard them until they hatch to protect them from predators. And then eventually the adults will die off as summer comes along. The nymphs will grow, and they'll probably be mature by fall, go through the winter to hibernate, and be out there in the landscape next spring. Now, okay, I have a few questions here. I'll try to go over these. Dave Barkley asked, how do we tell them from assassin bug nymphs? Okay, I guess that would have been the leaf-footed bug. They're actually very similar. The nymphal stages of the leaf-footed bug are very similar to the nymphal stage of the wheeled bug, which is one of our assassin bugs. One way you can tell them apart is that the leaf-footed bug nymph has a much longer mouth parts, much longer I'm sorry, I'm blanking on the term there, beak, you could call it, which actually extends beyond the tip of the abdomen in the younger nymphs. The assassin bug nymph has a much shorter beak, which fits immediately under the head, fits into a groove there. The assassin bug nymphs tend to be slower moving, are fairly active, and usually you're not going to find the assassin bug nymphs gathered together on the fruit of a plant like you will find the leaf-footed bug nymphs. Okay, somebody asked from Pasquotank County about spraying horticultural to destroy scales. I would defer.
Did you want me to do that one?
Yes, please, Steve,
okay.
would you address that one?
Okay, well, different scales can be more or less difficult to control with the horde oils. In general, the strategy is to try to direct your spray or oil spray at the crawler stage. That's going to be the most effective time, and so if you can identify the scale, we can tell you, or you can figure out when the crawlers are going to be present, and that's the best time to spray. Personal protective equipment recommended. The danger of the signal word on oils is usually just a caution, so you want to make sure you don't be reckless with it, and I think always wearing gloves is a good idea. And as far as the dosages go, check the label, because it's always, there's little variations on there. In the winter, if you're using it as a so-called dormant, usually it's the same product, but they may have a higher dosage. In the summer, you can usually use the lower dosage. Now, the trick to avoid phytotoxicity is check the label and see if that particular plant is listed somewhere as already having shown phytotoxicity. There's still no guarantee that your plant won't show it up. But the other tricks to the horde oils is to not spray them on the plant that is in direct sunlight, and also to not spray them on a plant that is not well hydrated. So make sure your plants have been watered hours before, or are definitely imbibed well, and don't spray them at any time where direct sun will hit the plant before that spray has dried. So those are kind of the little tricks to the trade to avoid that. What do you suggest to control snail in vegetable gardens? That's a tough one. Some of the little cultural things you can do that are sort of laughable in a way are to put something out like a little asphalt shingle or even a board, and then routinely go out, turn that thing over in the morning, and destroy anything that you find underneath. As far as, you can also go out in the evening and try to collect and destroy what you have. Many times they are coming out of the mulch, so if your mulch never dries out, that could be a source of your slugs and snails. And then probably the snail and slug baits, which tend to contain carbamate, such as 7 or something like that. Those are reasonably effective.
But also add to what Steve said. I'm sorry, Steve?
Go ahead, yeah.
Okay, I'll just add to what you said. In the vegetable garden, most of the damage is going to be done by slugs rather than snails, and typically, as in the case, it's going to be introduced species of slugs. Our native slugs usually stay in the woods, feeding on native plants or on mushrooms, and don't cause damage to the garden, but there are a number of species of exotic introduced slugs, and those are the ones that seem to do all of the damage in our vegetable gardens and our flower gardens. There are a few introduced snail species also that occasionally will cause localized damage as well, but not to get off on too much of a tangent, it so often seems to be the introduced species that do the most damage, whereas our native ones are well behaved and seldom cause problems for us like that. Okay.
Great. Let's take this one last question. It's really from Mike, and it's from Tanya, and that's can cucurbit downy mildew also occur on Lagenaria?
Yes, I just checked on that on bottle gourd. It is reported, and I can't tell you how destructive relative it would be to what it does on other cucurbits, but it is reported as a host. It is a cucurbitaceous plant.
Okay. Well, I am going to go again since I'm controlling this thing, and we have one more question from Robert about diatomaceous earth, effective control on slugs. If you get the large container of diatomaceous earth and smash it on the slug when you see it as hard as you can, usually that will take care of it. The diatomaceous earth as applied by the label is really slightly effective at all, just moderately or even less than moderately. In the south, particularly where we have humidity and moisture, these little barriers tends to not really be that effective. So I wouldn't really spend my money on that particularly. Now, the upcoming schedule here, just to point out, is next time we're going to talk about organic gardening. Steve Moore is going to be with us. And then following that, our fourth and final one for the season is going to be permaculture with Will Hooker, who everyone finds entertaining all the time. October 4th through 7th is the Master Gardener Conference in Mooresville, and Lucy has added that to our schedule. So we want everybody to be aware of that. Now, let's just, if you can, give us applause to our presenters today one more time. It was great. If you've got any suggestions on programs or suggestions to how to make this run any more smoothly, we would appreciate those kinds of things too. And we're all kind of learning this Illuminate a little bit as we go along. So we thank you for being so patient with us. And that's all we've got. If you have further questions, we might be able to take those by the board, or email would be just fine. So thank you all for coming, and God bless, if I can say that, with the university, and we'll see you next month. Bye.